research, and I wrote this book, and I don't have a table in the back or nothing. You don't even have to buy it. I'm just telling you the story. I wrote this book called Quit Your Job or Die. And when I wrote it, I thought I was going to title it Quit Your Job or Die for a little while. And then when I finished the book, I would give it its final title, because that's kind of common. You give something a working title, you get done, and you retitle it. But by the time I got done with it, I realized that a better title couldn't be found. Because if you're employed, you are 5 times more likely to have a heart attack Monday morning between 6 and 10 a.m. than any other day of the week. Is that because you love your job so much? As a matter of fact, doctors will tell you you start getting stress hormones about sundown Sunday afternoon. You really do. And it starts in middle school. Because we so fear what's coming tomorrow that we start actually having stress hormone releases Sunday night. And that causes heart attacks Monday morning. It is so serious that this is why people say time flies. Because something else that kind of just caught my attention, I'm kind of just a basic, I'm not a really smart person, I just see patterns, right? So one of these things that kind of caught my attention was when I talked to really, really old people, like 90 years old and over, they would always say a story as a long, long time ago. Oh, that was a long, long time ago, son. But then I talk to people in their 70s, and they're like, oh, man, my son's high school graduation seems like yesterday. And I'm thinking, well, why is there a difference? Why is there such a difference between people who think that every story was a long time ago and people who think their birth was just yesterday and, man, this thing flew by? And I noticed a difference. The people who are in their 90s grew up in a completely different system. They grew up in a world where most people were entrepreneurs. The people in their 70s and under grew up in a world where most people were employees. Now, that might not seem significant, but watch. When you ask an employee about their week, they hate Monday. Oh, man, it's Tuesday. Oh, we got to get through Wednesday. It's hump day, right? You hate Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You are living for the weekend. It's true. So you're living for the weekend. You're living your life. All the memories you want to remember are made on Saturday and the first half of Sunday, which means in 70 years, you live 6. That's why time seems like it flew by so fast. But if you remember back to when you were in school and you skipped school or mom gave you a mental health day or whatever you called it, right? When you didn't go to school that day or you skipped work that day, you called in sick, have you noticed how you can wake up late, read a book, have lunch, go to a movie, go visit your sister, and you're like, wow, it's only 3 o'clock. And then you can notice how much you get in a day? What if every day was that way? Now, if you're 90, by the time you get to 90, you're like, wow, that was a long time ago. Because you have thousands of days of stories like that, as opposed to only 6 years worth of stories. Does that make sense? So I realized there's a reality to that. And what really kind of hit me when I became a believer is I noticed nobody was talking about this stuff. When I became a business person first and then a believer. So business person, believer, I'm thinking, okay, I now believe in God. This is awesome. What do? I went to a Christian bookstore looking for Christian business person books. Couldn't find any. There were the prosperity gospel, buy my magic handkerchief for $700, turn around 3 times, yeah, you're a millionaire, right? That sort of thing. And then there was the poverty gospel. Money is not important, but make sure you give 10%. And then there was a little bit about how to get out of debt. But that was it. I'm thinking, well, God had to say more about this than that because he talks about money more than he does heaven. I don't know if you knew that, but he does. Why is there no books about it? So I kept studying. I found out it's bad for your health. Found out that women are actually more affected by employment than men are. And then it even impacts marriage. So let's say you and your spouse get married. You're standing in front of your pastor, your rabbi, your priest, a ship captain, a mayor, a judge, whatever. You're getting married. I love you, baby. I love you too. You mean the world to me. I love bald men, right? This whole deal. Who doesn't love bald men? Anyway, so this lasts for about 2 weeks, right? And then what happens? You come home from the honeymoon. She puts on her nice clothes, makes up her face, and goes to work, usually with or for a man. She will see that man be decisive, make decisions. He will chase a dream. He'll be after something, right? She will help meet him in those goals. Where's the number one place women have an affair? At work. At work. Same thing is true with men. Men will go to work. There will be a woman there who supports him, who believes in him, who tells him he can do it, who will help meet him. Where's the number one place men have an affair? Work. Well, I thought the Bible said flee temptation. You are more likely to have an affair at your job than you are if I dropped you off at a strip club, not even trying to be funny. But I thought the Bible said flee temptation, not go to it. So I'm looking at this list, and that takes care of number 4. But what about 1, 2, and 3? Well, check this out. The average family only spends 49 minutes together. Oops, that was a few years ago. Now it's down to 34. So, if you understand that the family only spends 34 minutes a day together, you take out children, the average married couple only spends 19 minutes together. Does that sound like the plan from the Father? No! See, I'm not about prosperity gospel. I'm not about poverty gospel. I'm just about the gospel. He didn't say, hey, marry this woman and spend 19 minutes a day with her. But when you look at this, how are you supposed to have good communication in 19 minutes? It's impossible. So no wonder it's the number one reason. And no offense to the people who do marriage retreats or marriage camps or marriage counseling or people who write the books like The 5 Love Languages and Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Those are all good things. But have you ever asked yourself, why does this generation need those things? And if you're alive, I'm talking to you as this generation. Why do we need those books? Why did grandma not need those books? Why did great-grandma not need those books? Why did every couple back to Adam and Eve not need those books? Because they spent time together. Grandma knew how Grandpa thought. She didn't need a total stranger who's never met you to teach you how the person you're sleeping with thinks. Just think about the lack of logic there. The author who you've never met knows more about the person who's 2 feet away from you than you do. But Grandma, if Grandpa got upset, she would say, oh, don't worry about it, sweetie. He'll go out to the shed, he'll tinker around with his wood project or whatever, he'll be back in a half hour and apologize. Sure enough, Grandpa would go out, come back a half hour later, I'm sorry, son, I overreacted. How did Grandma know that? Because they spent time together. Number 2, sex. There's kids present, so I'll just say it, 19 minutes. Number 3, money. Notice how it's never a lack of, or it's never an argument about, I'm divorcing you. You keep leaving hundreds all over the place. I've had enough. That's never the argument. So even if we were honest, it would be either lack of money or mismanagement of money. It's not money itself. That didn't cause the argument. But those are the top 4 reasons for divorce. So in reality, the top 4 reasons for divorce, which is 50 to 60%, is employment, 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 and employment. So not only is it dangerous to your body, it's dangerous to your family. And those of you who are old enough know exactly what I'm about to say is absolutely true. You can track when dad went to work and mom stayed home to now mom and dad both have to work. How did society go? Did it get better or did it get worse? Worse. I don't care what your political ideology is. I don't care where you're from. It got worse. Because you took the core of the family out of the family and said, okay, well, we're going to spend 34 minutes together, and now we have to run commercials after our favorite TV show reminding us to have dinner together? Doesn't that strike you as odd? But nobody seems to bother. Suicide now kills more Americans in traffic accidents. Never, ever, ever do I give a message about, oh man, you need a jet, you need a Ferrari. That's not what the point, no. We just need to get back to what God said and get control of this thing. Because suicide now kills more people than traffic accidents. Do you know what the number one reason for suicide is? If you don't know, rhymes with honey and starts with an M. Yep. Financial stress, number one trigger for suicide. But we don't even talk about it in suicide classes, let alone church. Suicides are in an increase 30% since 1999. 30% increase. If we had a 30% increase in anything other than this, we'd have public safety announcements. Farmers, same thing there. Unemployed people are 72% more likely to kill themselves. So don't tell me money doesn't matter. It might not supposed to matter, and that's a great conversation, but tell that to the people who are 72% more likely to kill themselves. So when we have a situation like this, and we, the body, don't talk about it, the blood's on our hands. I don't want that. But Josh, isn't money the root of all evil? What's wrong with that sentence? The love of money. So let's just get real here for a second. The love of money is the root of all evil. The sad reality is, before tonight, if I were to hand most people the marker, whether they're pastors or just, regular Constantinians or what you call Christians, whatever you want to call them people, if I gave any of them the marker and said, underline the action word, all of Christendom does that. Most Christians would fail third grade English. And I'm not kidding. A third grader would know that's not the action word. This is the action word. But yet Christendom has gotten so dumb, we now think that money is the action word in that sentence. So instead of worrying about what money is, let's worry for a second what love is. What is love? That's a great answer. God. But if we were to take a real example, like let's say when you were dating your spouse or something, when you love her or him, you think about her all the time. You try to spend as much time with her as you possibly can. When she's not happy with you, it ruins your day, right? Well, let's replace girlfriend or spouse with money. You think about it all the time. You spend all your time trying to make it, and when it's not happy with you, i.e. debt or a bill, it ruins your day. So most of us, in our poverty, love money. See, we have this idea that the love of money is the rich guy. No. I've met way more poor people who love money than rich people who love money. Does that make sense? I was at this Christian men's conference, and I asked the men, I said, okay, men, how many of you are fathers? A bunch of hands went up. I said, okay, those you Christians telling me that money's not important, if your daughter came home with Tattoo Timmy and said, Daddy, I'm in love, I want to marry this man, what's the first thing you ask him? Honestly, what's the first thing you ask him? What do you do for a living? The first question is money. The next question is, how much is the wedding going to cost me because you're the father of the bride? The next question is, where do you plan on living? The next question, right? And by the time you get to question 13 or 14, it's, son, do you walk with the Lord? Mr. Money's not important? Then why is it the first 5 questions you ask whoever's going to marry your daughter? Does that make sense? Great. I'm a child of the 80s, so I throw in 80s references. So I host a talk show, which I found out today will probably start airing here in Albuquerque. But I host a talk show, and I had a guy call me once. And he said, Josh, you're always talking about entrepreneurship. That's just so greedy. And again, I will never tell you, oh man, you got to have a $400,000 car. Nothing like that. Nothing. But he's like, oh, you're always talking about entrepreneurship. That's so greedy. I make 78 grand a year. I got mine. My response to him was, you greedy, selfish pig. Because when you say a sentence like, I make 78 grand a year, I got mine, I'm doing okay, I don't need more than this, all I hear in that is you. I don't need more money, I'm happy. That's greed. That is literally the definition of greed. Let me take you to a children's burn unit, introduce you to Sally Sundress, who needs an $80,000 operation, and you say, sorry, sweetie, I make 80 grand a year, I got mine. That's greed. You should say, I could take $1 billion, give it away in the city of Albuquerque, and still not fix the problem. Father, help me get $10 billion. Greed is not the money. Greed is what you do with the money. Greed is what you do for the money. Again, just like we can love money in our poverty, we can be greedy for money when we're poor. When people tell me, I'm not greedy, money's not important, and then 3 months later, I see them leave their family, leave their church, leave their children's school, all the things that are more important than money, in order to move 4 hours away for $5 more an hour, that's greed. Told you this would kick a little bit. Yeah, but God wants me in that job. It just seems so easy. I applied, and the more qualified people applied, but I still got it. God wants me here, right? No. No, you have to do some serious Bible gymnastics to make that argument work. Because this is the problem. The Bible tells us that the Father will work all things to your glory or His? His. So let's give an example. Let's say Matt murders me. Matt is not a believer. Bad Matt. Matt goes to prison. While in prison, the prison ministry ministers to him. He accepts Yeshua, and he's going to go to heaven. Are angels in heaven rejoicing? Yes. But can we make the theological argument that God wanted him to sin to make that happen? No. The same thing is true with your job. Same thing. You have to convince me, if God wants me to have this job, you have to convince me that God wants you in the number one place for destroying your body. I thought the body was a temple. You have to convince me that God wants you in the number one place for an affair. I thought He told you to flee temptation. You have to convince me that God wants you in the number one place of poverty. 98% of employees, get this, 98% of employees will be broke on their 65th birthday regardless of how much money they make. If you can somehow make the Bible say those three things, you got some Bible magic. So don't tell me, well, God wants me here. Now, I'm not saying if you're 16, you shouldn't have it. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying as a culture, as a people, we're not supposed to be teaching employment. It's not supposed to happen. You know, when we look at other communities, and we were just having a conversation about this, when you look at the Jewish community, a Jewish dollar will go hand to hand to hand to hand in that community 12 to 14 times before it leaves that community and goes into the general American population. A Muslim dollar is 14 to 16 times. That means that, let's say, Muhammad, and hats off to him, they're doing what God said. Muhammad wants some shoes. He's not going to go to Walmart to get the shoes. He's going to go to his cousin Habib's house, or his Habib's store, and buy them there, even if they're a little bit more expensive than Walmart. Why? Because it stays in the tribe. And if Habib doesn't sell shoes, he's going to import his cousin Ishakar and he's going to sell shoes. Seriously. This is why, do you know, really? So all of this is off the cuff. I don't have note cards, so I don't know where this is going to go. But do you know the wealthiest demographic in America? And no, it's not white guys. It's Indians from India. 1 in 7 are millionaires. 1 in 7. Do you know why? Because they don't come here and get a job at Walmart. They come here and they start a business. And they even have a tribal plan for it. It's called a chitty. And this is how it works. It's genius. Let's say there are 10 Indian families already in town. They each will contribute $10,000 a month. That's a lot of ching, right? They will take that $10,000, and let's say he's part of the community. They'll take that $10,000, and when it gets enough, we're buying him a gas station. Then we do it again. And then we get enough, we're buying her a hotel. Which is why the Patel family now owns 70% of the hotels in this country. And we're sitting here going, well, I can't make it on Wednesday night because I got to work late. Really? Really? Huh. I put this in the book, Work versus Prison. I just thought it was kind of funny. It should be Hillary, but anyway. Anyway, that's whole tan. Anyway, work versus prison. In prison, you can have personal phone calls. You can't at work. In prison, you can have visitors. You can't at work. In prison, you can go outside and play. You can't at work. In prison, you can have a conjugal visit. Try that at work. In prison, they give you a Bible. Can't at work. 50 out of 50 states now, it's illegal for you to proselytize at work. Where are you more free? Isn't that interesting? And I had somebody hear this once, and they come up and they say, well, Josh, but at work, I still get to go home at the end of the day. You can in prison, too. It's called work release. So how much do we need? 4 out of 5 Americans are at or near poverty. 4 out of 5. So look around you. Americans have amassed a record $13 trillion in debt. More than 40% of Americans aren't paying their student loans. Half of Americans can't afford basics like rent. And for those of you, well, the economy's getting better under the new administration. No, it's not. That's from just a couple months ago. Americans haven't gotten a raise in 16 years. You can change that. It's now 19 years. Millions of Americans are one paycheck away from financial disaster. You get all this, yada, 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 you get it. If you're alive in 68, 40% of Americans now make less than 1968 minimum wage. So if you make less than $22.50 an hour, you're making less than 1968 minimum wage. Many middle-class Americans plan to work until they die. This is what really breaks my heart. I don't know any of you from Adams, so I don't know if any of you are financial planners. If you are, you're about to get mad with me, but I'm going to say it anyway. The entire financial industry is based on how quick do you plan on dying. If you go see your pension specialist, your retirement person, your Edward Jones, Scott Strait, whoever, the question is, how long do you plan on living so we can make sure you don't run out of money? That's the plan? The plan is to hurry up and die? Who came up with this plan? But because of that, many middle-class Americans plan to work until they die. And I really want to talk to the young people who are 40 and under. Insurance actuators, which are the bean counters who figure out, the odds of a plane crash and all that sort of stuff. Insurance actuators will tell you if you're 40 and under, the most likely place of your death is your place of employment. Because you're not going to be able to retire at 68 like the old people. You're going to die at work. So I hope you really do love it. But let's talk about that a second. That's a lie too. When you say, I love what I do, you're lying. You're lying. Here's a gut check. If they stop paying you, would you still show up? If the answer is no, then you lied. The things you love are things you would pay to do. You lay down your life for the one you love. So we really have to get this straight. And little kids know this. Little kids, right out of the mouth of babes. Little kids, when you say something stupid, like, I love my job, or I love this pizza, what does a little kid do knowing that makes no sense? If you love it so much, why don't you marry it? Right? Because they at least know there's something wrong with your sentence. That's not love. If you're telling me, and I'm being serious. I know some of what I say is funny, but it's not supposed to be. But I'm being serious. If you tell me I love what I do, yet you are married and spending 19 minutes with your wife, you are either evil or psychotic, and I'm not kidding. Because you're supposed to love her. Does that make sense? Social Security is getting dipped into. Growing old is getting more expensive. 1 in 2 Americans don't have $500. Back to what just makes sense. I'm not talking about how to get rich. But can we admit that if you're 25 years old and you don't have $500, whatever you're doing isn't working? You know what I mean? It's just not working. If you've been in the workforce for almost 10 stinking years and you don't have $500, stop what you're doing. Because people always tell, well, I have to keep this job. It pays the bills. No, it isn't. So, I asked once, again, just, I don't know if it's ADD or what, but what does it take? What does it take to be broke? Because they tell you that poverty is 18.5. Well, I know people making 36.2 who can't find 2 sticks to rub together. So where's this 18.5 coming from, right? Yeah, so I wanted to figure out, and these are national averages. They're all sourced in the book, so go ahead and if you get a book, they're in there. But they're all national averages, so I don't know what housing costs here, okay? So it might be lower, higher, whatever. But housing, $1,000 a month. Car insurance, $144. Cell phone, $73. I don't know anybody with a $73 cell phone bill. Maybe Boost mobile users or something. I don't know. Utilities, $264. Cable and internet, $100. Food, $332. Gas, $220. Car payment, $466. 10% savings for retirement, $385. Stop. What do we know already? 1 in 2 people don't have $500, so don't give me that. Anyway, college loan payment, $575, which you're not repaying, by the way. Life insurance, $33. Health insurance, $402. Now, is anybody going to say, oh, that list is greedy, man? Anybody? I hope you live someplace warm, because clothes are not on the list. Batteries for your remote that controls the TV are not on the list. This list is $70,000 a year. It takes 70 grand a year to be broke in America today. Now, again, I think God will be with you if you're homeless living under a culvert. I really do. But we have to be honest with ourselves. If you're going to work in order to make money, and you're not making it, stop. New 83 is new happiness benchmark. They don't know why. You're going to get an education. How many people have seen the movie Dirty Dancing? Okay, some of you. Including some burly-looking dudes who I'm like, really? Anyway. I'm gonna explain to you what's going on, and you're going to get it more than your econ professors. If you have a degree in econ, you're about to surpass your professor. This is what's happening. 1, 2, 3. In 1929, we became an employment-based economy. An employee cannot keep up with inflation. It's impossible. Inflation has been 10% a year, every year, since 1871. I know your financial planner or your banker told you, well, no, it's not, it's 3%. What they didn't tell you is whatever the CBO comes up with, the Congressional Budget Office, which is where they get the 3%, they have to put on at least another 3% legally. So it's at least 6. But they also changed how they calculated the CBO's version of inflation. 3 times since 1995, they changed how they did the math. Because what they used to calculate, rice, butter, potatoes, rent, they took off the list. Instead, they put on things like heavy equipment, jumbo jets, right? How many people in the last 6 months bought a 747? Right? So why do I care if it went up only 1%? Now, how many of you have eaten in the last 6 months? So I better care if it went up 306% for a pound of potatoes. 306%. So Pastor, can I borrow you for a second? Come on up. This is why there's an income gap. It's not a conspiracy. It's not the Illuminati. I mean, just think about it. Do you realize that 1 in 10 homes in America are now millionaire homes, right? 10%. What percentage of the population is entrepreneurs? Just take a random guess. 10%! Huh, go figure. But let's say this is our starting line. So face this way. This is our starting line. I'm an entrepreneur. He's an employee. Entrepreneurs can keep up with inflation. So along comes the 10% inflationary wave. I move forward 10%, move forward 3%. Now next year comes, I move forward 10%, move forward 3%. Notice how the income gap is getting bigger. It's not a conspiracy, it's math. Because what happened was you had a shift after 1929, the Great Depression, where the scale tipped. We went from an entrepreneurship-based economy to an employee-based economy. So now when most of the people cannot keep up with inflation, what's going to happen? Bigger and bigger wealth gap. Go ahead and sit down. Thank you so much. So now, going back to our Dirty Dancing reference, this is what happened. That first generation after the Great Depression and the New Deal, that's baby's dad in the movie. Okay? So all these employees start at 0. Inflation hasn't hit them yet. They were the first generation. As he's going through his productive life, inflation still didn't destroy him. So their generation, probably most of you guys as parents, could retire. They could retire with a paid-off home. They could retire and maybe go to Boca, whatever. They could retire because inflation didn't eat up all their money. And usually only dad had to work. Right? Now baby, which is a baby boomer, she actually was starting to get eaten up by inflation. Halfway through the baby boomers' productive years, about 1986, somebody in the government actually did the math and said, oh my gosh, this is a tsunami. They're not going to be able to keep up with inflation. So they said, well, we need to temporarily delay this problem. Where do most people have most of their wealth? In their house. So halfway through their productive years, the government, without trying to cause panic, came up with what's called a reverse mortgage. Now today, every third commercial is a reverse mortgage because it allowed you to get your money out of that thing before you realize you're not going to make it. Now, the next generation, which is the rest of us, we're not going to make it. So we're not. And we see that. We see that in the fact that when I was born, my dad could work one construction job and keep me and my brother in home with my mom. And by the time I graduated high school, mom had 2 jobs, dad had his job, and we couldn't afford the house anymore. We had to get an apartment. This wave is coming. And it's almost like the old, remember Bob Barker in Price is Right? Remember the little guy? And you're like, stop. That's where we're at right there. So let's just fast forward for the sake of time. Here's proof. Inflation between 1919 and 2018 was 1,351. Can't even do it without coughing. 1,300%. So according to their own math, inflation's 14%. Well, now, in 2018, it's only 2.44 because they changed the math. Just do some basic math. If we went up 1,300% in 100 years, divide that by 100. What do you get? You get it. And who would have ever thought they would see a day where if you make $117,000, you qualify for government assistance? Not kidding. So, we don't need to cover all this. My point is this. When we don't talk about this issue, we get taken out by it. One of the things I get to do is I get to speak in churches, right? And I remember sitting in a seat, actually it's on that side, right there, and the pastor says, all right, anybody want prayer? And a handful of people come up. One exception, all the prayers were money related. But money's not a problem. We'll get back to this at some point if you want. But this is a slide I want to show you, right? Oh, actually, let's talk about this a second. Yeah, but you don't need a lot of money. The woman with 2 coins, the widow's mite, she proved that, right? We pervert that story so bad it's not even funny. I feel sorry for this woman. This woman puts in her 2 widow's mites, and the bell rings, and even Yeshua stops, right? Oh, it's a great story. And pastors preach this story because, hey, give. And I get it. But what do we know biblically was the truth back then? They had what was called debtor's jail, which means we know she's not in debt. Debtor's jail worked like this. You could go out during the day. Usually they would put you in the stocks or something. They would put a basket down, and people would give to get you out of debtor's jail. And once you got enough to pay your debt, you were free. Well, that means she's not in debt, which also means she's wealthier than 98% of the room I'm talking to. But most of us, right over our heads. We miss the entire point of the story. Debt affects your state of mind. People in debt are 3 times, now for you math whizzes, 3 times written out as a percentage is what percent? Say it out loud, you got it right. 300. 3 times is 300%. So let's read it that way. People in debt are 300% more likely to suffer from mental health problems. So we see these school shootings, we see people going nuts, we see all this terrible stuff. We see that 1 in 4 adult Americans are now on some sort of mental health drug. Not one doctor asks them, are you in debt? Yet it's the largest cause. Oh, just take a pill. Does it fix the problem? No. But getting out of debt is never enough. And this is something that's been killing the church too, so I want to talk about it. And I don't mean to kill anybody's golden calf here, but we have to. There's a very popular teaching that talks about you got to get out of debt. Just get out of debt. Eat beans and rice if you have to. Get 2 jobs if you have to. Sell the RV if you have to. And just work, scrimp until you get out of debt. And then call this guy's radio show and scream, I'm now back to broke. And somehow being back to nothing is success in America today. But here's the problem with that. And if you know who I'm talking about, I'm really not trying to be mean to the guy. We have this weird 3-way friend circle going on. But there's just a reality to this. He doesn't take into account inflation. And if you don't have a way to keep up with inflation, guess what happens? So, when do you realize you need to make over your money? Are you 20? Honestly, 45 maybe, right? So let's say you're 45 years old, and you realize, holy cow, we have a financial problem. We need to do the beans and rice thing. First, let's look at the solution. Go get more job. We just talked about how dangerous more job is. You want to add to it? You want to add to the fact that I might have a heart attack? You want to add to the fact I'm going to have heart disease? You want to add to the fact that I might have infidelity issues? That's the plan? But let's say your marriage survives and you get out of debt. Hallelujah. You're 45 years old, you're back to nothing. And you do gazelle step 1 or whatever. Now, because you cannot keep up with inflation through employment, what happens? 10 years from now, you're back in debt. So now you're back in debt, you're at a minus. And let me ask you a question for those 55 and older. Is it harder or easier to get a job at 55? Harder. Is it harder or easier to live on beans and rice? Harder. And the 55 and older crowd are not buying jet skis. They're not wasting money. They're paying rent and medical bills, something you can't cut. So church after church after church now is calling us, asking us to fix this problem that everybody did in churches across the country 15 years ago, because now they're in a worse position than if they would have just stuck with it. And because of that, tithing is at record lows since we've kept records. Church foreclosures are at record highs since we've kept records. 7,000 churches a year get foreclosed on. Kind of funny for a book that says do not be a debtor, isn't it? And I had a guy from the church lending industry on my show talking about this. And he said, Josh, I'm going to be honest with you. If we treated churches the way we treated houses, it'd be way worse. Just nobody wants to be the bad guy and foreclose on a church. It'd easily be 14 to 20,000 churches a year. Because we're not doing what the Bible said to do. Which means we're missing the number one opportunity. People ask me all the time, Josh, why don't we see miracles in America like missionaries do in Uganda or something? You know, my missionary friend goes to Uganda. There's somebody without a foot. They pray. Poof, foot. Why don't we see that in America? Because that's not our hurt. That's not our hurt. In America today, and thankfully God gave us the technology to do it, but in America today, we make fake feet that work better than real feet. Those dudes with the little curly Q feet, they can't be in the Olympics. Why? Because they're faster, stronger, and they don't get tired. Rush Limbaugh is stone deaf. He plugs himself in. He's got a little flap behind his ear, lifts up the flap, plugs himself in to his radio station, and hears you calling. We got that. Our hurt's financial. So when the church doesn't teach these things, when we don't teach how God said to make money, we're missing the number one opportunity for evangelism. Because Jesus, Yeshua, fed them, then he preached to them. He healed them, then he preached to them. He said, what good is it to say God bless you and send him out in the cold without a coat? So there's a very real reality of you have to meet the earthly need first before they'll listen to the heavenly. And he even said it. If you don't understand the earthly, you're not going to understand the heavenly. But what do? We live in a broken world dominated by money problems. 98% of employees have money problems. They come to us, the church, whether it's the individual or the building, and they come in and they say, help me. Help me. I'm on wife number 3. I haven't talked to my daughter in forever. I got heart disease. Help. And our answer is, slap a cross on it. You'll be fine. Really? That's the plan? And then they say, I thought you were in the world, not of it. Why are you making money the way the world does? And we wonder why church after church after church has more gray hair. Just being honest. There are 4 types of people in the Bible: masters, laborers, servants, and slaves. Employees not in there. I looked in the Strongs. It didn't exist yet. 4 types of people. We know who the masters are. Rich guy on top of the hill. We know who the slaves are. Didn't have a choice. They're captive. But that leaves us 2. And just like this sentence, we need to find a definition to a word. Because the book of Matthew tells us you cannot be a servant to God and money. Not that it's a sin, not that it's a na-na-na-boo-boo. He says you can't. You can't do it. You're going to love one, hate the other, hate one, love the other. Whoo! Then we better find out, just like the love of money is the root of all evil, we better find out what it is to be a servant. In biblical times, a servant would work a 10 to 12-hour shift. A servant had to show up when the master said so. When do you have to be to work? A servant's day was done, not when he was done, but when the master said so. What time do you get to go home from work? If a servant saved up enough money, he could buy his freedom. It's all throughout the Bible. Today we call that retirement. Oh, honey, if I could just save enough money, I can get out of here. A servant, if he loved his master, could go to the city gate, put an awl through his ear, take his master's mark, and be his for life. Today we call that tenure and pension. Folks, employment is serving money. Because you're not working for a cause. You're not working for something greater. What are you working for? Let's just be honest. What do you go to work for? Money. The very thing he said you cannot do. Which leaves us with, not only are we serving money, worse yet, that's what we're telling our kids to do. Go to school, get good grades, get a job. What does the Bible say to those who teach kids the wrong way to do things? Woe to those who teach these little ones to stumble. Better a millstone tied around your neck. If you're a parent, we have some repenting to do. Laborers were different, which is why Yeshua used them as examples. A laborer would say, you have a field, needs work. I will work that field for this price, and when it's done, I'm out of here. And he uses this example. Remember, the 2 workers are already there. The other 2 workers show up. The first 2 workers are like, dude, why are these people getting the same as we're getting, right? And it's a parable about he who gets saved later in life still gets the same reward in heaven. Totally got it. But he used laborers as the example for a reason. Because the laborers said who, they said when, and they said how much. Once the laborer was done, he didn't have to come back tomorrow. He could spend the day playing with his kids or dating his wife. When the laborer was done, he could take that money, and if he expanded his skill set, he could go to the Sea of Galilee and fix fishing nets and live there. And a laborer was free. That's what God tells us to be. But we don't do it. Instead, forget all this. I want to talk to you about this. Instead, we teach employment. And then we ask, well, why doesn't God bless me? You know, equally yoked is a work term, right? Like it applies to marriage, hallelujah, definitely don't mean equally yoked. But do you know what a yoke is? Sometimes in modern society we forget how ox work. If you have 2 oxen and you yoke them together, they work, right? They're plowing the field. If they're not equally yoked, this is a true story. If they're not equally yoked, one will be faster than the other, and it'll break the neck of the other ox, which is why it was so important to be equally yoked. Well, think about it from a work term. Are you equally yoked? Are you equally yoked to your employer? Did you ever ask them, are you a believer? Or did you just answer the ad that says, hey, we're hiring? Honestly. So in the thing you're doing 40 to 60 hours a week, you're unequally yoked? And then believers come up to me and say, well, Josh, I'm praying for a blessing at work. I'm praying for more money at work. Wait a second, Jack. That means you have to convince me that God is going to bless your boss in his sin in order to give you more money. I couldn't find that chapter in the book. But entrepreneurship is completely different. Entrepreneurship is God providing for his people. Because if you really think about it, employment is saying, you provide for me. Because I can see you, I can touch you, I can feel, I don't want to talk. But entrepreneurship is literally waking up every day and counting on him to do it. And it's just like the sparrow. People say all the time, oh, well, God will provide. Sure he will. But he provides for the sparrow too, right? And no sparrow wakes up in the nest and poof, birdseed just fills his gut. He still has to go out and get what God provided for him to get. And we seem to forget that. But that's what entrepreneurship is, because God will bless you in that. I'll give you 2 examples. A friend of mine, a believer, he owned a gym on one side of town. He was in negotiations to buy the gym on the other side of town for a few $1,000,000, I don't know, 5, 7, whatever, some odd $1,000,000. Lawyers are going back and forth for months and months and months doing the negotiations. My friend has a dream or a vision. Abba is telling him, don't do it. He calls the lawyer. Says, lawyer, we're not buying the gym. Lawyer, just a secular law guy, right? He's like, what? What do you mean we're not buying the... We've spent like 5 months working on this thing. What do you mean we're not buying the gym? He says, hey, I believe in God. God said no, not buying it. A few months go by. Lawyer calls my buddy up and says, hey, are you sitting down? He says, yeah, why? What's up? He says, well, you know those 2 brothers we were going to buy that gym off of? He said, yeah. He said, I just got off the phone with them. They're going to give it to you. What? This is a true story. What do you mean they're going to give it to me? He said, well, when they were trying to sell it, they were counting on that being their golden parachute, right? The reality is that they drove it so far in debt that if you just take over the debt, they'll give it to you. He says, what? So he got it for free because he let God be the blessing. I have one. We bought a birthing center. Do you have those there? Like where, not a hospital, but you can go there and have like babies in the water or whatever. So we bought one of those for $1. And this thing does, and please understand, I'm not trying to say this to brag. It does over $800,000 a year. I bought it for $1 because of Abba. Me and my wife were going to have a baby. We go into the birthing center. I'm an entrepreneur, a laborer. And the midwife having a rough day. You can just tell, right? She's yelling at the receptionist and whatever. And we're in our appointment, and she's doing whatever, and I can see she's having a rough day. And I'm not even looking for an angle, right? I'm just trying to be nice. I'm like, you okay? She says, man, it is so hard. It's so hard being the care provider and trying to run this business. And I said, well, you know what? You're helping us. I'm kind of good at this thing. So I will meet you for lunch, and just help. So then that's how I thought it was going to work. We meet with her. It turns out that she's a pro-life believer, and her policy at her clinic is if she hears any client or any worker say the A word regarding pregnancy, abortion, you're fired on the spot. Because she believes in life. So here she is with this business that she can't seem to get going, right? It's just driving her down. And she says, well, our only 2 options are to shut it down and we all get jobs at hospitals or something, or B, sell it to the big conglomerate, and we still work here, but then we're going to have to offer abortions. And she says, so either one of these, I can't deal with it. So we were praying as a staff, God, send us an answer. And you showed up. And she said, do you know what the name of our company is? I said, well, yeah, the birthing thing. And she said, no, like the actual company as it's filed, Push. I'm like, well, that's cute, Push, pregnancy. And she says, no. Pray until something happens. We prayed, something happened. And she said, I will give you the business if you will take it over. We just want to help people. And I called the lawyer, and the lawyer said, somebody can't just give you a business, charge her $1. I said, will you sell it for $1? So I bought it for $1. But all because I'm not in a job 40, 50 hours a week. I'm out here where God can bless me. And because you are, he does. He says, I'm a light unto your feet. Well, that means you only get to see the very next step. You don't get to see the whole path. You have to walk it out. Does that make sense? Any questions on any of this? Because I really love questions. Any questions on any of this? Rock on. Y'all are smart. Yes? I'm saying that every family needs to have some sort of entrepreneurial aspect to the family. Because until 1929, we did. The Jews still do. Which is why nation after nation turned out hating the Jews. Because what would happen? They would come into Spain, they would come into Germany, wherever they would go, right? And they would end up with all the money. And the people who were like the Nazis, National Socialist Workers' Party, right? The employee party. The employee party's like, how'd you all get the money? But the same thing is happening right now, and hats off to them. Same thing is happening in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, in Saudi Arabia. Why? Because they build businesses. Well, we used to teach that, which is a great segue into this. This is a book that's in my bookshelf in my office. That's my hand, to give you an idea of how small the book is, right? This is a 7th grade math textbook. It fits in my hand, less than an inch thick. So this is what we taught in 1929. Why is that important? Because this is the last textbook before they started training employees. First chapter of the book. First chapter of the book is running your business. Talks about selling goods for your store. I could run an MBA level course out of a 7th grader's textbook in 1929. In that book, it talks about setting up your distribution. How do you do your inventory? How do you pay your laborers? In 7th grade, we taught kids, unless you're an idiot, you're going to leave school and start a business. Now we teach them the exact opposite. We really do. I was on the air when Steve Jobs died, and this lady calls in and she's like, oh, we need more Steve Jobs what's the plural of job? Whatever. Jobs-I? Whatever. We need more Steve guys. We need more of these Steve guys. And I said, you say that, but I don't believe you. Because if your kid came home and said, Mom, I'm dropping out of school, you'd have a heart attack. And then if you said, Mom, not only am I dropping out of school, but I'm going to start a business, you'd resurrect just to have another heart attack. But that's what Steve Jobs did. See, you're not teaching Steve Jobs, you're teaching the opposite of Steve Jobs. And that's what really struck me. Bill Gates, drop out. If you look, I'm not kidding, if you look at the 400 wealthiest people in the country, number 1, number 2, number 5, and number 7 all dropped out. Number 3, number 4, and number 6 are all doing something other than what they got the degree in. Like not even related. Because entrepreneur or employment can never get you on the list. Does that make sense? So we took away what we taught people. This used to be in church. Church wasn't just let's get together for 40 minutes and read something. Even back in Yeshua's day, church was a strategy session. That's why they midrash that puppy. How do we leave here and take that over? Does that make sense? But great question. Any other questions? Now, it's, at the time, Bill Gates. So the guy who founded Microsoft quit school. The guy who founded Apple quit school. Yeah. First, we have to start getting it to be part of our culture again. Christian culture's dead. We have no culture. Now, the Hebrew people have a little bit of culture. We might cover our hair, we might wear tzitzit, we might wear kippah, whatever. We do the feast days. I love going to a house and seeing a menorah. Totally get it. Or a mezuzah. So we have a little bit of culture. But this is equally part of our culture. See, the problem is in regular Christianese sort of churches, they always, well, we have a business ministry here. Then you're missing the point. Business wasn't something some people did and they talk about it on Tuesday. Business was what you did. Within 15 miles of the temple, most people don't know this, within 15 miles of the temple, all those businesses gave to the temple. And the temple bought only from those businesses to the point where the Levites, when it wasn't their rotation to serve in the temple, worked the business. It was so integral. It was so integral. Business was so part of our culture as Hebrews that when God took the people out of Egypt, did he say, money's not important, so leave it all behind? No. He said, take yours and theirs. Loot the place. Because what did they do for 40 years in the wilderness? They traded with other societies. You know, a lot of people today are worried about, like, oh, what happens if society crashes? Great. Because the entrepreneurs are the ones that always rebuild it. Every single time. People say, oh, well, I'm stocking up on guns and ammo, which is great. I do SHOT Show every year. I'm a huge gun nut. Awesome. But that's only going to be the first 2 weeks of chaos. After that, who rebuilds society? Entrepreneurs. Stocking up on bullets is good, but you should also stock up on diapers, baby food, feminine hygiene products, because when her baby is crying, guess what's more valuable than bullets? Baby food. So we have to start making it just part of who we are. And the Mormons are even good at this. Do you know most of the Burger Kings west of the Mississippi are owned by the Mormon Church? They realize, wait a second, this is how we make money. Same with Marriott hotels. But great question. We have to start doing it. And then we have to start raising our children to do it. Does that make sense? I didn't even look at the clock when I started. How am I doing? We doing okay? All right. Then what I'm going to do, you want to take a break, right? I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to talk about how we raise our kids to do this. And I'm going to ask that this next segment, we don't film or tape or record or anything.